can feel him flying like
Ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming NACD past president and chair of the NACD 2015 annual meeting, Gene Schmidt.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to New Orleans. I was taught that's how you say it, so Ruben, if I get in trouble, you tell me. Are we having a good time? All right, ladies and gentlemen, I got to tell you, we got to go through the routine here. You know about these things, don't you? Now, that's not a smartphone. So if that gives you any idea about the individual you're listening to, we're probably in trouble. But this is not a smartphone. But we might encourage you all to dial them to the remote mode. Does anybody like to see their community on the early morning weather news? That's usually not a good sign. And when I turned the news on this morning, it said our community had 19 inches of snow and 25-mile-an-hour wind. That being said, my wife is with me. My phone is on vibrate, okay? I left the keys to the snowplow with the boys. Trust me, even if you see my leg twitch, I'm not answering the phone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome and good morning. Here in the great state of Louisiana, in the city of New Orleans, and as the announcer made, the 69th annual meeting of the National Association of Conservation Districts. Focusing on this year's theme, conservation, key to a healthy nation. This year's conference will highlight the role of a district, you folks, in the conservation delivery system, and its impact on the national conservation resource across every state and territory. This week, we have a tremendous opportunity of being surrounded by conservation leaders from across this great nation. I hope you will take full advantage at this time to network, learn, ask questions, and most of all, go back home equipped with new information, ideas, and most importantly, take home that so positive attitude you all have to your local districts and communities. Before we get started with the program, please join me in just thanking our great Louisiana folks and their hospitality, please. I'd also like to take a moment to recognize, folks, it's all about education. And Grandma says you're never too old to learn, so I hope I'm still in that process. But it's about the next generation. And with that effort, we partner with NRCS and inviting some college students here to be around you folks and to learn some things, and most importantly, be able to take something back that they can share with the folks that they hang around with. So if any of those college students here, would you please stand? Let's recognize them. College students are here? Don't be shy. Here we are. Again, thank you for you folks being here, and it's all about the education and planting the seeds for the future ahead of us. Now I would like to ask the Reverend Father T. Cooper from St. Bonnell Catholic Church, Maytree, Louisiana, to please come forward and lead us in invocation. Reverend?
Good morning, everyone. The book of Genesis, in its very first pages, points to the wise design of the cosmos. It comes forth from God's mind and finds its culmination in men and women made in the image and likeness of the Creator, to fill the earth and to have dominion over it as stewards of God Himself. My friends, the harmony between the Creator, humankind, and the created world as described by sacred scripture, was disrupted by the sin of Adam and Eve, by man and woman who wanted to work and take the place of God and refused to acknowledge that they were his creatures. As a result, the work of exercising dominion over the earth, tilling and keeping it, was also disrupted, and conflict arose between mankind and the rest of creation. Human beings let themselves be mastered by selfishness. They misunderstood the meaning of God's command, and they exploited creation out of a desire for absolute domination over it. But the true meaning of God's original command, as we read in the book of Genesis, clearly shows was not a simple conferral of authority, but rather a summons to responsibility. The wisdom of the ancients had recognized that nature is not at our disposal as simply a heap of scattered refuse. Biblical revelation made us see that nature is a gift of the Creator who gave it with an inbuilt order and enabled us to draw from it the principles needed to till it and keep it. Everything that exists belongs to God, who has entrusted it to men and women, although not for our arbitrary use. Once man, instead of acting as God's co-workers, sets himself up in place of God, he ends up provoking a rebellion on the part of nature, which is more tyrannized than governed by him. Man thus has a duty to exercise responsible stewardship over creation, conservation, to care for it, and to cultivate it. A special role in raising awareness and in formation belongs to different groups present in civil society and to both governmental and non-governmental organizations which work with determination and generosity for the spread of ecological responsibility, responsibility which should never be more deeply anchored than in respect for human ecology. The good work of the National Association of Conservative Districts, representing America's 3,000 conservative districts, has offered a positive and inspiring model for responsible common effort to environmental stewardship that moves beyond approaches based on selfish personal interest towards a vision constantly open to the needs of all people. My friends, as we begin, let us stand and bow our heads in prayer. Almighty God, in giving us dominion over the things of the earth, you have made us fellow workers in your creation. Give us wisdom and reverence so as to use the resources of nature for your greater honor and glory, and for the common good of all people, that no one may suffer from our abuse of them, and that generations yet to come may continue to praise you for your bounty. O Lord, giver of life and source of our freedom, we are reminded that yours is the earth in its fullness, the world and those who dwell in it. We know that it is from your hand that we have received all that we have, all that we are, and all that we will be. Gracious and loving God, we understand that you call us to be stewards of your abundance, the caretakers of all that you have entrusted to us. Help us always to use your gifts wisely and teach us to share them generously. Heavenly Father, you have blessed us in so many ways. Productive soil for agriculture, ready access to navigational routes, and a topography conducive to building. We thank you for our rivers and waterways. We pray that they will be rivers of life, spiritual life, natural life, and commercial life. Guard our waterways from pollution and allow us to be good stewards of your gift of water. We thank you for the wetlands, which store and slowly release water over a long period of time, recharging our aquifers, filtering out pollutants, creating habitats for plant and animal life. and help bring the atmosphere into equilibrium. Bless these inhabitants. May they continue to cleanse the land and the air and be a source of water for farmers and all your people. We thank you for the timber that grows along the rivers, on the hills, and over the plains. Bless the hardwood trees and pines. Guard them from pestilence and destruction. We thank you for the rich and alluvial soil deposited in our floodplains. Grant landowners wisdom to protect the soil from erosion and mineral depletion. Grant our farmers good health. Guard their crops from pests and weeds and unseasonable weather. We pray your gracious providence for bountiful harvest for those who honor you. We thank you for this opportunity to gather for this annual meeting of the National Association of Conservative Districts. May it be a time of renewed strength and grace, of creativity and healthy dialogue, and of mutual respect and learning, so that all men and women may work together towards true environmental stewardship of your creation, which leads to a true human ecology. May we, who receive so much from your hand, always give you thanks for these blessings. We ask all of this through you who are the author of eternal life, in Christ our Lord. Amen. Please remain standing for the presentation of the colors.
Thanks, Father Reverend Cooper. Color Guard, present. Ladies and gentlemen, as the members of the Chalmette High School Choir, CHS Voices, under the direction of Annalise Kazar, our national anthem.
Stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we watched, were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave,
Ladies and gentlemen, now asked to join Mr. Ruben Zazette, President of the Louisiana Association of Conservation Districts, as he comes forward to lead us in the pledge.
Good morning. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank
Forward, march, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, left, left, march time, march, 1, 2, 3, 4, colors, halt. Present, arm. Order, arm, march time, march, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, forward, march, left, 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 right, 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 left, left, cosmos, march, left, left, right, 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 left, right turn, march, left, forward, march, left, 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 right, 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 left, 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 right, left, left.
Ladies and gentlemen, we just talked about the next generation. We just saw a tremendous exhibition of our youth right there in action. If that doesn't warm your heart and bring a tear to your eye, I don't know. Thank you so very much. Now I'd ask Ruben Dassat to come back up, President of the Louisiana Association, and tell us about New Orleans.
Please be seated. Bienvenue à Louisiane. Si tu peux parler français, ça c'est bon. Si tu peux pas parler français, tracasse pas. I'm just telling you, we are a city and a state of different languages here in Louisiana. But today, we are one language with all conservationists gathered here in this city. We speak one language, and that's the language of conservation. It's for our soil. I'm here to filibuster a little while because our main speaker, who's going to introduce you to Louisiana, is en route, but he's not quite here yet. But I'm not going to tell you a joke. But welcome to New Orleans. Welcome to Louisiana. Our city is full of sights and sounds. Our heritage is here for you to experience. Our food, our cuisine, our culture is at your fingertips. Please take advantage of the opportunity that you have to go out, explore the city, see why New Orleans and Louisiana is so unique, and let's not wait so long to have the next convention back in New Orleans. Welcome.
Thanks, Ruben. And you heard Ruben mention, enjoy the sights. A word of caution. When I was a youngster, I'd go with my father to the blacksmith shop. Anybody been to one of them? My dad would say, don't look at the welder if he happens to be welding because it'll glaze your eyes and you'll see stars. And he says, don't look at the counter on the wall, you may not see it all. So Ruben told me just be cautious with my eyes. Next, I'd like to ask Mr. Larry, I had to jump the screen here. So give me Mr. Donovan Taves to join me on stage, and we will start with our Parade of States. Please.
Good morning. I too would like to welcome all of you to Louisiana. It's good to see y'all here. And at this time, I will welcome each state individually to the great state of Louisiana. Starting with Alabama. Welcome, welcome. Alaska. American Samoa. Arizona. Welcome. Arkansas. Welcome, sir. California. Welcome, sir. The Commonwealth, Colorado. The Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. Welcome. Connecticut. Delaware. District of Columbia. Mr. Peters, good morning. All right. Federated States of Micronesia. Good morning, sir. Florida. Good morning, sir. Georgia. Guam. Hawaii. Idaho. Illinois. Indiana. Mr. Ray. Yes, sir. Iowa. Good morning, welcome. Yes. Kansas. Good morning, welcome. Kentucky. Louisiana. Maine. Welcome. Maryland. Maryland. Welcome. Welcome. Massachusetts. Michigan. Minnesota. Welcome. Mississippi. Welcome. Missouri. Welcome. Montana. Welcome. Nebraska. Excuse me. Nevada. Welcome. New Hampshire. Welcome. New Jersey. Welcome. New Mexico. Welcome. Good morning. New York. Welcome. North Carolina. Good morning, welcome. North Dakota. Ohio. Welcome. Yes, sir. Oklahoma. Good job. Welcome. Good to see you. Oregon. Welcome. Good morning. Republic of Palau. Welcome. Pennsylvania. Welcome. Puerto Rico. Rhode Island. Welcome. South Carolina. Welcome. South Dakota. Welcome. Tennessee. Welcome. Texas. Welcome. Utah. Welcome here. Vermont. Welcome here. Virgin Islands. Welcome. Virginia. Washington. Welcome. West Virginia. Wisconsin. Here. Sir. And finally, our friend from Wyoming. Welcome here. And again, thank you and welcome to Louisiana.
Ladies and gentlemen, what a tremendous presentation of those of us across the country in representation of the states and territories. Let's give them another fine round of applause, please. Now, in the business world, folks, they always say it's never done till the paperwork's done. In the program business, it's never done till the photos are shot. Again, with that display, ladies and gentlemen, individually, each of our states and territories has much to offer. But when we're working together, the united commitment to conservation and our organization just magnifies our opportunity to accomplish great things. We can create a better future. We can speak our higher tone. We can unify our voice. And folks, that's why you're here, for the National Association of Conservation Districts. And we can't thank you enough. Now, it's my great pleasure to introduce you to an individual you know very well. He's done quite well. I lost my hair and my eyesight. Earl's kept it all. Please let me introduce you to a Louisiana native, but most importantly, folks, your president, Mr. Earl Garber.
Thank you, Gene. I brought a bottle of water because if you don't have a football voice, you may have a Mardi Gras voice. So mine is getting a little deep and a little grumbly. So if I have a little trouble, I might drink a little bit of that water. But, you know, it is really an honor and a pleasure for us to, here in Louisiana, to be able to host this meeting, to have such a large group of conservation leaders together here in the great state of Louisiana. You know, it's as you work towards programs, and Gene's been the program manager under my presidency, and as we began to look at directions for this convention, I told Gene, I said, we have to put a bookend on this for me, because I said that we started here in 2009. I was elected second vice president. 6 years later, we're going to close the chapter with my finishing up here in the great state of Louisiana and the city of New Orleans. So thank you for coming. And I hope you have a great time in this city. I hope you have a great time at this convention. And make it your convention. I told that to the new-timers yesterday morning. Make sure and make it your convention. Don't be afraid to go in and see what's happening in all the breakout sessions and other things that are going on out there. You know, as I conclude my term, it's truly a team effort to get this job done. And I want to thank you, the supervisors that have supported NAC during my presidency. Couldn't do it without you. I want to thank the officer team, the executive board. These guys, most of them were elected newly to their position 2 years ago. I want you to know they're well engaged, they're active, and they're good decision makers in your behalf. I also want to thank the staff, and headed up with John Larson, our CEO, and all the others. They're dedicated to your effort. I'll get emails at night. I'll get emails on weekends. I'll get emails on holidays. I don't know what else you can ask of a staff and when they fulfill that type of obligation out there. But you know, the last 2 years has been busy. Last year I mentioned that we had done a 3MO memorandum of understanding with the Bureau of Land Management, with the Joint Forestry team, and with the Conservation Technology Information Center. We're looking forward to signing some memorandum of agreements here at this convention with the Conservation Partnership and also with the National Conservation Foundation to go forward with work in your behalf. But you know, I think in my 2 years, I think the largest accomplishment, without a doubt, we recognized it while we were in Anaheim last year when the 2014 Farm Bill became reality. You know, it was a long, drawn-out effort, 3 years of work. We accomplished a lot. The programs were consolidated so more dollars can go to the ground to deliver to the landowners, to get conservation on the ground, to protect our water and our natural resources out there. In addition, we worked hard to try to open up the door so the Secretary of Agriculture had some flexibility to be able to make sure there was enough dollars to deliver conservation in America, and we were very successful in that effort in the Farm Bill. The other thing that was in the Farm Bill I think we're excited about is conservation compliance has now been tied back to the premium subsidy to give insurance to our producers out there. This will assure the American taxpayer that the dollars are being well spent and that they're being spent for our generation and future generations to come. There's many other things that are in that Farm Bill you can be proud of, but I will say we couldn't have done it without you, the grassroots effort that gets the connection to our congressmen and our senators to make them understand just exactly what's needed out there. You know, as we finish that effort, I kind of wondered what life would be like without doing Farm Bill work, but I was quick to realize that there was no rest for the weary. At our fly-in, we began an effort to have a concurrent resolution introduced in Congress to support the voluntary incentive-based work that you do to deliver conservation out there. We were successful in doing that. We had it introduced thanks to your grassroots effort. We didn't complete that effort because, as we know, we reached a mid-year election period, and that pretty much slowed down the activity in Congress. But I asked the leadership going forward that we continue this effort in the 114th Congress. I think it's very important, and I think there's 3 reasons why we can succeed this year. It's going to be the 80th anniversary of the Soil Conservation Act, 80 years already since our president saw the need to do something to get conservation on the ground. It's a non-election year, and it's the year of the international soils. And your president-elect, Lee McDaniel, has already attended an event at the USDA a few weeks ago to initiate this activity. So stay tuned to that, but in the process, I think these are good reasons why Congress will see fit to support what we do in conservation out there in America. As we went along during the year, there was another unexpected area of interest that came up, and it was related to the waters of the U.S. and dealing with the definition of the areas that are affected in requiring permitting. Your leadership was requested by the administrator of the EPA to come in April ahead of her actually releasing it to give us an update on how it may and possibly affect conservation application on the ground out there. We had a heads up, and we really appreciate that from the Environmental Protection Agency. They also gave us the opportunity to come in a little later in the year to meet with their head staff in the water works and to give them details on how we saw maybe the effects would be. Spent a lot of time on this. Your leadership and your efforts, a lot of time was spent. But I think we came up with the proper representation of what our membership would want us to do. Of course, we asked the EPA to take the rule and work on it again because we feel like that there was an increase in the jurisdictional requirement. And we hope that our comments that we provided to EPA will give them some guidance as they go forward with completing their project in relation to this definition. 2014 also brought about another change that your leadership stayed involved in, and that's dealing with the national youth, or the international youth, I should say, education program called the Envirothon. Your your National Conservation Foundation took on the responsibility of coordinating and supporting the Envirothon. Your foundation is a 501c3 that has the same goals as you do. Your executive board appoints the members to that foundation. Your immediate past president serves on that board. I say to you today that your leadership of NACD, will continue to work closely with this organization to make sure that we make the Envirothon a world-class youth conservation environment program that we can be proud of in the future. You know, when you look back in history, there are milestones that we go through in relation to conservation. Several of you have probably seen several of these milestones. Just the introduction of the act that I referred to earlier is the first step in the first milestone, I think, in this country. Watersheds, PL 566, that was a milestone. I think you're experiencing another one now, and that's the soil health movement. Your National Association of Conservation Districts has been active in this area. I think it's just the beginning of all that can come in behalf of soil health. It ties to the security and the wealth of our nation if the soil is healthy. I think most everybody can buy into that on every acre out there. We started out in the summer with a program working in partnership with the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service, with Dow Agri-Sciences, with the Indiana Association of Conservation Districts, and thank you, Indiana, for your support for that meeting. We were able to highlight the hub farms that they've put in place in Indiana to promote soil health and the practices that work in their region. I think we have to stay involved. I hope your district gets involved in this effort out there. And we have another meeting coming up in July in Spokane, Washington, 11th through the 13th, to see what the work is being done in the Great Northwest. So Stay tuned, stay involved in this activity. So as we move forward in 2015, there are many things on the agenda for your leadership and you. One of the key things is we have to get with our congressmen and our senators because the landscape is changing. When these individuals are elected in today's world, they are sent to Washington to basically say, explain why the dollars need to be spent. We have to convince them that spending dollars on conservation in America is good for the future, the security, and for all the generations to come in this country. So absolutely stay involved. You're the grassroots effort, and we'll need your emphasis. We're going to try to get the concurrent resolution reintroduced. We're going to have a fly-in in March that you can be involved in. So come and join the effort as we try to bring the new Congress up to date on why this is an important effort. This past September, your National Association of Conservation District was awarded a USDA NRCS Conservation Innovation Grant. This is a big effort that your organization is going to be taking in behalf of soil health. We've partnered with an organization, Day 2, who does economic research. We think it's critical that the economics that are provided by good soil health to the producer needs to be documented. In the process, your national organization, with your help out there on the district level, is going to try to attempt to get the model that Indiana has set and have farms that will become the model farms on what practices are working in those areas, in those regions of the United States. You know, I've said this before at other meetings, and I'll say it again. I don't know if anybody has a more challenging soil health issue than we do here in southwest Louisiana, where we grow rice and crawfish. And the land is flooded almost 15 months out of a 24-month period. That creates some problems in the soil health. We're working diligently. We would be looking for a hub farm maybe in that area to try to figure out what we need to do. That's what you need to be thinking about in your area and to participate in our CIG grant. And I think that'll be critical. And John, his staff, and the leaders will continue to look for those locations. So if you know someone in your district and your state and that region may fit that, come to John and let him know that that opportunity is there. So as we look at the theme of our convention, where we selected the piano keys, I imagine some of you kind of wondered, and you're probably just thinking of the blues, but the idea behind this, as your leadership met and had plans for this convention, is that we wanted to select that to point out the keys of conservation in America. You know, when you talk about conservation, it means a lot of different things to people, but the one that I think it means, what we stand for at Conservation Districts, is planned management, careful use of natural resources to prevent them from being lost or wasted. So what I would like to do here as I wind down in my talks is to point out a few activities that are going on in different states and regions as to how districts have adapted to do conservation out there in America to secure our natural resources for the future. I'm going to use the piano keys, and I'm going to use the letters, the notes, C, D, E, F, G, A, B. So C, conservation partnerships. There's an excellent program going on in the Conservation District of Southern Nevada. It's known as the Conservation Partnership Program, CPP. It's an incentivized local businesses to come in and meet certain conditions to be certified. This has been recognized here recently by a prior mayor of Las Vegas as to how well this is working. The local district has it set up to where they can self-certify themselves to meet different standards, and they've got it set on a gold, silver, bronze, certified, and associate. They're able to monitor it. They're able to recognize them when they reach those points. Chris McGee is the district chairman, and Mike Becker is the vice chairman. This is an excellent effort out there working to build partnerships with the local businesses and the local individuals as to how to deliver conservation on the ground. D, for drought management. We all know that we've been facing drought in a lot of different locations in this country. In Texas, the water needs is expected to increase by 22%, or 22 million acre feet by 2060. while the supplies are actually going to reduce by 10% and only have 15 million acre-feet available. Their population is expected to increase by 82% in the next 50 years. They began an effort that was passed in 2011 by the 82nd Texas legislature to establish a water supply enhancement program. The Texas Soil and Water Conservation Board is overseeing this, and the local districts have become very active in this effort. And we have Mr. Jules Richmond and Mr. Volney Huff, who are in the audience here and are going to be around the convention. Take an opportunity to visit with them, and they'll give you the details of how they see this helping eliminate some of the noxious brush that has developed in Texas on a lot of their watersheds, and that is reducing the water that's reaching their aquifers and their streams to recharge. So look into it, learn about their win-win situation that's going on in Texas. E, for ecosystem services. Districts in Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky are partnering in a water quality trading effort on the Ohio River Basin. You've got 4 districts in Ohio, 5 districts in Indiana, and 5 districts in Kentucky that are heavily involved in this effort. The districts play a local position by allowing the producers to come in and apply. If they qualify, they're putting conservation on the ground under a 5-year program. They get some cost share. Once they do that, then they qualify for this water quality trading credit for them to be able to sell. So reach out to those states and visit with them and see what's happening there that maybe it would fit you. F, for forestry. This past summer, Washington State had the largest fire in history, roughly a third the size of Rhode Island. The Carlton Complex in the Okanagan Conservation District, that district got active in the needs during that time by responding to the emergency, by coordinating the information and the restoration efforts, and by seeking funding for ongoing restoration and protection efforts. But they did more than that. They joined in a partnership with the U.S. Forest Service, with FEMA, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to coordinate the first multi-jurisdictional burned area emergency response team analysis. You have Mr. Craig Nelson in the audience here today from that district. He's the manager. And I would hope you'd take the opportunity to visit with them because, as we know, in the western part of this country, we have been dealing with quite a bit of wildfires. So I think they've set quite a model here that you can learn about and utilize maybe if you're dealing with the same efforts out there. G for groundwater. The Jefferson Soil and Water Conservation District in Ohio, and happens to be the home district of Irene Moore, the president of the Employees Association, has been active in assisting the farmers out there that are dealing with the activity in the oil and gas industry. They've teamed up with the Ohio Farm Bureau, the local Farm Bureau, and the Ohio State University, and they're coordinating numerous meetings to inform the landowners of the information they need to deal with pipelines, to deal with other things that go with that infrastructure, dealing with farmland, water withdrawal, and other things that they needed the information on so they're knowledgeable to deal with. They're also even joining up with the community college, and they're teaching classes to the oil field workers on Soils 101 and erosion control, and they've developed a watershed educational model that they can actually utilize in that classroom so that those workers can understand how it affects the environment, and it's called Enviroscape. So Irene, in that district, thank you for what you're doing out there, and I think it's important because, as we know, the oil and gas infrastructure is growing. We need it. It's good for the country. A for alternative energy. In Iowa, Madison County Soil and Water Conservation District, which just happens to be the executive board member from the North Central, Tim Palmer's district. Tim has been very active in this. Wind farms are being installed in his district. His district realized that they were coming in, putting in the infrastructure, but they weren't necessarily paying attention to some of the programs that were on the ground out there. So they reached out to them. The contractors were totally surprised that they were interrupting some of these practices. In the end, they made money available for a technician to be available to go out and do assessments. They've reached out to other districts. So congratulate his district, Tim's district, for this type of work to begin to work the efforts of this infrastructure tied to wind farms and affecting the natural resources. And the last one, B, for bioenergy. The New Hampshire Conservation District is home of the largest wood energy pelletizing plant in the Northeast. Nearly all the districts in New Hampshire are connected to biomass industry, both in the economic development and in the growing of the fuels for that. And you know, when I saw this, as they sent it to me, I realized we have the same thing going here in Louisiana. If any of you are going to travel back home on I-10, back through Baton Rouge, once you cross the Mississippi River Bridge on the right-hand side, there are 2 new large dome structures that have recently been built in Baton Rouge, and the purpose for those dome structures is to move wood pellets from Louisiana forest to England. So it's not only in New Hampshire, it's happening here in Louisiana, it's probably happening in your state, but look into the bioenergy and see what you as a district can do out there. So in conclusion, as you can see, the 3,000 soil and water conservation districts, there's 17,000 supervisors, directors, whatever the title is, and we know it varies out there, have been very busy on the local level. They're being very successful. They're finding those niches, both on the financial end and on an engagement into their community. The challenge to the NACD is to convince you, when you're successful on the local level, that it is still very important to support the national efforts that go on in your national organization. We must realize that there will always be a balance that needs to be maintained between the national priorities and activities and the local land, water, and cultural concerns. Your NACD can remain the one voice for conservation in America if you stay engaged and if you support the efforts that we work together on. Ladies and gentlemen, as the son of a founding chairman of the Lafayette Soil and Water Conservation District, a person that sat at the table at home when they signed the papers to form that district in the mid-'60s, one that read the Tuesday newsletter and saw the picture of the presidents of NACD and never dreamed I would be your president. It has been an honor and a pleasure over the last 2 years to serve as your national leader. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the meeting.
Thank you, Earl, and thank you for the dedication of time, not only from Earl himself, but his family and everybody involved. And folks, that's truly what it takes, not only when he looked at you folks as a team effort, but those that give it their time as your leadership to accomplish that same process. You know, Grandma said the only reason to have a plan, if you didn't have one, you didn't know it didn't come together. And what your leadership gave you as an opportunity to, when we look at the Farm Bill, probably one of the biggest issues that was a concern to us is, as you legislate something, give us the ability, give you the ability to implement that. And the only way you can do that was with flexibility. Flexibility. And I can share that with you when you're putting together a meeting like this, you better have a little flexibility. And as Ruben so eloquently gave you the French version, we are honored to have the Lieutenant Governor of Louisiana, Jay Dardenne, here to give you the true version of Louisiana Welcome. So would you please welcome me as we ask the Lieutenant Governor Jay Dardenne to join us on the stage. Jay was reelected to a 4-year term as Louisiana's Lieutenant Governor in October of 2011. He previously served 1 year in that position, filling an unexpired term. He also served 4 years as Secretary of State and 15 years as a state senator. An active community leader, Lieutenant Governor has hosted Jerry Lewis Telethon for the Muscular Dystrophy Association for more than 30 years. Thank you for that. He is an attorney and a graduate of Baton Rouge High School, Louisiana State University, and LSU Law Center. Welcome, Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you very much. I apologize for running a little bit late this morning. I'm looking over here at Bethany to make sure we have my PowerPoint up. Do we have that? Do we know? Good, got it. Okay, good. I'm going to play a little music for you in the course of my remarks today. But first of all, let me welcome you to New Orleans and welcome you to Louisiana. You've picked a great time to be here, obviously, as the Mardi Gras is beginning, and it's a great tradition for Louisiana. And I want to take a few moments to tell you a little bit about the significance of water in our state and talk a little bit about Louisiana's history to kind of put in perspective for you why we believe New Orleans and Louisiana are unique among the 50 states. We are here, obviously, because of water. We're here because of that magnificent Mississippi River and the portal that it provided for people to come to the New World. A lot of people think that everybody who came to America came through Ellis Island in New York, and that's incorrect. A great many people came through the port of New Orleans, and certainly the people who inhabit Louisiana today are descendants of those people who first came to our state through the port of New Orleans and ventured up the Mississippi River. So let me put this in perspective for you. You have to go back 3,500 years to truly appreciate the great mix of ethnicities and cultures that make up Louisiana. 3,500 years ago, in the northeast corner of our state, Native Americans had a very sophisticated settlement not too far from the Mississippi River. They were hunters and gatherers. They went out and got things and brought them back. There's absolutely no evidence of agriculture ever existing at a little place called Poverty Point, where these Native Americans settled. But they went out and collected hundreds of thousands of baskets, I guess, full of dirt from the Mississippi River to build the tallest mounds in North America at the time. This was 3,500 years ago. Poverty Point just this past year was named the 22nd place in America and only the 1,001 place on the planet to be a World Heritage Site. So we're very excited about that designation for Poverty Point. So those Native Americans, the earliest Louisianians, they didn't call themselves that at the time, got here first. And then if you fast forward century after century after century to the mid-1500s, a Spaniard named De Soto discovered the Mississippi River, this great magnificent artery through what is now the United States of America. And about 100 years later, a Frenchman named Robert La Salle got on a canoe somewhere in the northern part of what is now America and headed south and got out of his canoe a little bit south of here in New Orleans and planted a cross in the ground and named this place Louisiana for his boss, King Louis XIV. And then a couple of French-Canadian guys, whose names you'll recognize around here, Iberville and Bienville, came and explored that river valley and ultimately founded the city of New Orleans. We'll celebrate the 300th anniversary, the tricentennial of New Orleans in 2018. So it was 1718 that this city was founded. And ironically, Bienville got here to Louisiana on Mardi Gras Day. So it was appropriate that that was the day he landed. Incidentally, he was only 18 years old at the time. But then what followed was a steady stream of Europeans who came to Louisiana, to New Orleans through the port. Sicilians and Irishmen and Germans and more French people, and ultimately bringing with them involuntarily Africans who came not because they wanted to be here, but because they were slaves, and that was part of the culture of Europe at the time. So all these different ethnicities got to Louisiana in the 1700s and the early 1800s, and those Europeans also brought with them their Catholic faith, which was very important to the early development of Louisiana. And Mardi Gras, of course, is sandwiched between the two holiest days on the Christian calendar, Christmas and Easter, and it's this great, wonderful celebration that is so identified with Louisiana even today. But then, and this is where my PowerPoint begins, I think, if you've got the first slide. Yeah, there it is. Then what happened next was Thomas Jefferson got elected President of the United States. And I'm telling you all this so you can kind of get a perspective on Louisiana's unique nature and why you're here and the significance of water, which obviously is the reason for your gathering here today. Jefferson decided that America needed to expand westward, and to do that, he sent a couple of pretty sharp guys, James Monroe, a future president of the United States, and a guy named Robert Livingston to Paris to negotiate with Napoleon because the French controlled New Orleans. And Jefferson sent these guys over there to buy New Orleans. But instead of just buying New Orleans, they wound up buying all or part of what would become 15 states in America, many of your homes. They did this for 3 cents an acre. And we don't call this the American Purchase or the Jefferson Purchase. We call it the Louisiana Purchase because that's what America wanted and that's what America needed at the time. And a few short years later, and after 1803 and 1812, Louisiana petitioned to become the 18th state in America. And between 03 and 12, an awful lot of people from some of your hometowns flooded into Louisiana via the Mississippi River and via the Ohio River and other tributaries in the northern part of America. And there were Kentuckians and Tennesseans and people from the eastern seaboard, and they all got here after that purchase. But when they got here, they found that already here were French people and Spanish people and African people and Creoles, which was the combination of all these different ethnicities. And the Creole population that is unique to Louisiana resulted from the relationships that developed between Native Americans and Africans and French and Spanish. So these guys got here, and they brought with them, of course, their Protestant faith. They were white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. That was the makeup of most of America in those early days. And when they got here, these people looked a little different. And when it came time for Congress to decide whether to admit Louisiana into the Union, there was a lot of debate because they looked at Louisiana, they saw people with different skin colors and hues, speaking different languages, worshiping differently. And they said, well, wait a minute, we just fought a war to get away from Europe a few short years ago. We're not sure we want to do this, but cooler heads prevailed and Louisiana became the 18th state. And then the flood of white Anglo-Saxon Protestants who were in the minority at the time came to Louisiana. And that's why Louisiana remains different today. We were different in 1812 and we're different in 2015 because of the makeup of this state, the constituency of the state, and the culture that has been retained even today by each of these different groups who form what I like to call the human gumbo that makes up Louisiana. Now, shortly after Louisiana became a state, a very important battle took place here in New Orleans. So if you get the next slide, you get a little music now.
We took a little trip along with Colonel Jackson down the mighty Mississippi. We took a little bacon and we took a little beans, and we caught the bloody British in a town in New Orleans. We fired our guns and the British kept a coming.
Well, you recognize that song? Yeah, it's factually inaccurate. That's not the way it happened, but very significantly in 1815, as the War of 1812 the battles had ended, the treaties had been approved, but they had not been ratified, and the British decided they were going to come get another foothold in this new country. And the plan was, we'll take New Orleans, and if we take New Orleans, bingo, we control that river. If we control that river, the British can have a second chance at controlling North America. What they didn't count on was General Andrew Jackson coming to New Orleans and assembling this ragtag group of new Louisianians. They'd only been a state, they'd only been a part of America for a few short years, but General Jackson rallied all these different ethnicities and groups. There were slave owners and slaves fighting side by side, Creoles, aristocratic Creoles living in the French Quarter who'd never taken up arms before, Kentuckians and Tennesseans and Spaniards and pirates, Jean Lafitte, who sided with the Americans, the legendary pirate, not with the British. And so what happened, and we celebrated the bicentennial of this battle just a couple of short weeks ago, on January 8th of 1815, 2,000 British soldiers died in the course of about a 45-minute battle, not in New Orleans, but in Chalmette, Louisiana, which is in a different parish not too far from here, south of here. And you know, the Battle of New Orleans, Battle of Chalmette, what shall we call it? Well, the Battle of New Orleans won out because, of course, it saved New Orleans and it saved America and enabled us to expand westward. So the significance of this water body and Louisiana's role in making certain that America could expand westward is something that a lot of people really don't appreciate. But when folks come to New Orleans, I like to have the opportunity to remind them how critical our state was to the future growth of any of you who live west of the Mississippi. Now, as a result of all this, and you know from being here, you will know as you're here, we have many passions in Louisiana, and our brand for our state is pick your passion, whether your passion's food or music or fishing or recreational opportunities or festivals. You'll find it here in Louisiana. We only have 400 festivals in Louisiana. If something walks, crawls, flies, or swims, we have a festival to salute it, and then we throw it in a gumbo and eat it. But another special thing about our state that I hope you'll be able to enjoy while you're here is the great music that has come from Louisiana and that you'll be able to experience throughout Louisiana, throughout New Orleans rather, on Frenchman Street or here in the French Quarter, or anywhere you go, you're going to hear great sounds. And I thought you might enjoy hearing some of the great music that has come from Louisiana. So I'm going to take you real quickly around the state to see some of the folks who you may not realize are native Louisianians.
Killing me in that mini skirt, skipping rocks on the river by the railroad tracks.
Well, that's a young man named Timmy Smith who grew up in northeast Louisiana, a place called Start, Louisiana. When he was 11 years old, he learned that his father was the great left-handed pitcher for the New York Mets, Tug McGraw. And when he turned 18, he changed his name, and you all now know him as Mr. Faith Hill. That's right, Tim McGraw. All right, next.
The other night, dear, as I lay sleeping, I dreamed I held you in my arms. But when I woke, dear, I was mistaken. So I hung my head and cried. You are my sunshine.
Now, you can't help but tap your foot and sing along when you hear that great song, You Are My Sunshine. It's the second most recognized song in the world behind Happy Birthday. And its origins are right here in Louisiana. That's Jimmy Davis, who was governor of this state on 2 different occasions, who recorded that famous song, You Are My Sunshine. When he was governor of this state, he had a horse named Sunshine, and he literally rode it up the steps of our state capitol and brought it into the state capitol, and that horse is Sunshine. He's buried in the northern part of the state where he was born. He lived to be more than 100 years old, and he's buried on a beautiful rolling hillside in Jackson Parish, Louisiana, named for Andrew Jackson, incidentally. And there's a tabernacle constructed there in his honor. He was primarily a gospel singer, and if you ever visit that site, there's a sundial on the ground when you go there, and it says this, count none but the sunny hours. And that's kind of the way Governor Jimmy Davis made people feel. All right, next.
When I was a little baby, my mother rocked me in the cradle, and I'm old confused at home.
Now, that's a guy who's not quite as well known. His name is Huddy Leadbelly Ledbetter. He was nicknamed Leadbelly because he was a tough guy. He spent some time in Louisiana State Penitentiary. But after he was released, he became a great ambassador and a great troubadour for Louisiana. He wrote that song, Cotton Fields, that was reminiscent of the lives of his ancestors who were slaves. He wrote the song Midnight Special, and he wrote the great lullaby, Goodnight Irene. And he's memorialized in the Library of Congress, where they did a wonderful story with all of his recordings and his life story. And he is a great Louisianian who gave us some great music. Next.
You shake my nerves and you rattle my brain. Too much of love drives a man insane. You broke my will, but what a thrill. Goodness gracious, great balls of fire.
I can tell by your smiles and your knowing nods that you recognize Lawrence Welk when you hear him. No, that's not Lawrence Welk. That's Jerry Lee Lewis. Now, if you'd have grown up in Faraday, Louisiana, on the Mississippi-Louisiana border back in the late 30s or early 1940s, you would have seen 3 first cousins roam in the streets on Saturday night. Jerry Lee Lewis, Mickey Lee Gilley, and Jimmy Lee Swaggart. first cousins, all growing up in Faraday, sharing the same middle name and sharing the same piano that the Lewis family bought for little Jerry Lee, who went on to great fame and fortune as a great star in the early days of rockabilly music.
We've got the fishing line strung across the Louisiana River. Gotta catch a big fish for us to eat. He's setting traps in the swamp, catching anything you can. Gotta make a living, he's a Louisiana man. Gotta make a living, he's a Louisiana man.
That's a fellow named Doug Kershaw from the southwestern part of Louisiana, which is Cajun country. And you no doubt have heard a lot about Cajun country, enjoyed Cajun food. That's kind of a Cajun sound, that great fiddle sound. And there's another variety of music called Zydeco that you'll hear, that played with an accordion and a washboard that's worn over the shoulders, and spoons are used to make music, and a little triangle. And Doug Kershaw popularized that song, Louisiana Man. If you happen to have been with Neil Armstrong when he landed on the moon and began his walk on the moon, that's the song you would have heard. Mission Control in Houston played that song as they were getting off the spaceship and walking on the moon. All right, next.
All you wanna do is ride around Saturday.
That is a fellow named Buddy Guy. I will be with Buddy Guy later this week at the Grammys in Los Angeles. He is going to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Grammys, and Louisiana has a number of nominees every year, and we have a brunch out there to salute our Grammy nominees. But he left a little town called Lettsworth, Louisiana, north of Baton Rouge, and went to Chicago and popularized the Chicago blues sound that really has its roots in Louisiana. And Buddy was one of the guys who planted those roots, a great Louisianian. And you may recognize this next young lady.
I did it again. I made you believe we're more than just friends.
I saw her on the Super Bowl commercial last night. Some of y'all may have seen that. Before there was a Beyonce and a Miley Cyrus. The pop diva was Britney Spears, who grew up in Kentwood, Louisiana, in the Florida Parish area of Louisiana, kind of right where her picture is. And she became a great musical star and still is, and making a comeback these days. All right, next and last.
Marching in, when the saints go marching in. Yes, I want to be in that number. When the saints go marching in.
Louis Armstrong grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana. He began playing jazz music in some of the bordellos that existed around this place, and he left Louisiana and literally has become probably Louisiana's favorite son. His nickname was Satchmo, so named because his mouth was so big it was said to resemble a satchel, and that became Satchmo. He signed all of his letters, "Red beans and ricely yours, Satchmo." A great tribute to one of Louisiana's great delicacies, red beans and rice. But that's just a little of the sounds that have come from Louisiana. We love our music, we love our food, and we love sharing all the things that make Louisiana special with visitors to our city and to our state. So if this is your first time to New Orleans, have a great time. If you've been here before, I know you'll want to come back here again. People seldom come to Louisiana and leave saying, I never want to go back there again. It's usually, I can't wait till I get a chance to come back to Louisiana and explore some of the great sights and experience some of the great things that Louisiana has to offer. A great Louisiana writer a number of years ago described New Orleans like this. He said, "It's a poetic city with a prosaic population." And I think that's a great description of who we are, with this combination of ethnicities, this combination of cultures, and this ability to have so much fun and to share that fun alongside a very fervent group of people with multiple religious denominations who are able to blend together, having a great time along with their religious convictions. And we in Louisiana have also been able to blend together the oil and gas industry with the importance of water and fishing and port opportunities and other agricultural opportunities in the land of Louisiana, which someone I think once called a land of perpetual romance. And I like to think that that's a good description as well. So welcome to New Orleans, welcome to Louisiana. Thank you for being here. We're here because of water. You're here because of water. So we're glad to have you with us, and I hope you have a wonderful time while you're here. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Jardine. I think it's an excellent, the tribute, the warm and excellent tribute to the history of Louisiana. And I think when we think about that whole process and his correlation to the water and why we're here, but it's that piece of history, and without having that piece of history, sometimes you can't already understand the future and where it's been. And I think that's a lot to say about conservation. It's our role, as you all set before me, to help in that same history lesson to those that are going to come to fill the shoes behind us. Now I'd ask your NACD CEO, John Larson, please.
Thank you, Gene. It is truly a pleasure to be here in Louisiana. As Earl alluded to, some of us have come down with a little cold. I don't usually have this deep a voice. And I want to get one thing out of the way right away. Congrats to the New England Patriots. Many of you know that my roots are from Washington State, born and raised there. I just got 3 words. Run the ball. You know, this is my 4th NACD meeting as the CEO. It's an exciting opportunity. You know, I've gotten to that point where I know that things are going to work. And we want you to see and have the best experience that you possibly can. And so, as there are so many moving pieces in motion all the time, little challenges arise. What we want is for you not to notice that. So, as things go perfectly this morning, I hope that you see and experience a tremendous opportunity while you're here. You know, we have a very powerful and professional team at NACD. But with that, I also want you to understand how much we understand the connection to our local roots. We're an association that represents local conservation districts. We're positioned in such a way to help to advocate and be your national voice. We're committed to that. As Earl said this morning, the staff that I get to lead are extremely professional, committed individuals. And it makes my job as the CEO so much easier when I have that confidence and trust in the folks that carry out the work that, as we go through these next few days and have been for the last few days, also establishing policies, working together to set priorities. I have confidence that we can do that. We also have a core partnership that is world class. At times that partnership can be challenged. There are many, many different agendas by many, many different groups across this nation. But we as core partners, as we work together, as we take into consideration how do we strengthen that local delivery system, we each have our niche expertise and abilities. And when we work together, when we partner and utilize those aspects of the strengths that we each individually have, that group coming together is that much stronger. Earl talked about our soil health movement. I'm not going to call it an initiative because it's much larger than that. Soil health is an umbrella that covers every natural resource issue. Water, impacted by soil health. Wildlife, impacted by soil health. Productivity, whether that's agriculture, forestry, soil health impacts that. So, even down to the range, the pasture components, soil health impacts that. Join with us, be engaged with us to help to educate others on the value of that one simple phrase, soil health. One of the other pieces that the partnership is actively working on is trying to be an example. And so you're going to see on Tuesday, tomorrow's general session, we're going to sign a memorandum of agreement for the first time, which seems kind of interesting to me that we've never had one official memorandum of agreement between all 5 partners. We have one now. It has gone through an elaborate process of development into setting the expectations for each. You know, that's when things really get there. As Gene said, if you don't have a plan, you don't know when it comes together. We've got a plan that sets expectations, that puts in place how we're going to work together to, again, get conservation implemented across this great nation. It's those relationships in that partnership that then NACD takes its niche abilities out to other partners to demonstrate to them the value of the local delivery system. You know, I'm very proud of the relationships that the officer team, the executive board, the big board, and all of you in this room create with others to help them to understand the value of this delivery system. With this, we need to be looking and very knowledgeable about different opportunities. Opportunities are challenges, as we know, but challenges are truly opportunities, and we need to look at it in the positive light. Engagement is the key. We need your input. We need your engagement. Thank you for being here. I know you've heard me say this before. I'm preaching to the choir. But as you go home, make sure that others understand that we can only do that which we know about. Without engagement, we don't know it's there. The leadership at NACD has developed a district outlook task force. And this is specific to districts. This isn't specific to NACD. This is looking at it from the perspective of, as we venture into this unknown future, what can we do to assist the district, the local level, with being positioned in such a way to be successful? So I'm very happy that the core partners have agreed to partner with us. We're going to have representation that covers the entire nation. We're going to have partners that assist us in making sure that we're looking at it from every possible angle. We're going to take models. We're going to take different aspects of success stories out there across the nation and put together a package that hopefully you, again, can take home and look at how can we apply this locally. Earl also talked about the fact that we passed in Anaheim, or, well, we didn't. Congress finally did something. Congress passed last February a 2014 Farm Bill. The Farm Bill is one of those pieces of legislation that encompasses conservation funding and policy well beyond just production agriculture. It's an extremely important piece. For the first time in history, the conservation title was larger than the commodity title. Earl talked about conservation compliance tied to crop insurance. Crop insurance established as the safety net for producers with a compliance of conservation. Ladies and gentlemen, we are positioned in such a place that conservation is getting recognition. With that, we need to position ourselves to lead. And so we've started already on the next Farm Bill. We are positioning ourselves to be the leader, as our strategic plan says, to be positioned in such a way that NACD is the lead organization. I'm excited about that opportunity. It's a challenge, but it truly is an opportunity too. As I wrap up, I want to share with you something that in the 4 years that I've been in this position that I think I want you to know, and that's, if you weren't here yesterday, if you missed yesterday morning's inspiration program, you missed out. Mr. Brian Hacker from Kentucky, board member on the National Conservation District Employees Association, did a wonderful job of inspiring all of us that were in that room. His passion came across perfectly. And so with that, I wanted to let those that were in the room know we're going to videotape that young man, and we're going to provide that to you in such a way that you can use it as a training. Because as a very intelligent expert from a local district shared with me, that message was so critical. Because folks, when we think about it, we've kind of gotten away from, in certain discussions, you know, it's kind of like hunter safety. In hunter safety, the first thing that is taught is the ethics of being a good hunter. The safety part's important, trust me. A loaded weapon in a car is not a good idea. You know, there's certain pieces of the safety that's really, really important. But the first and foremost is that ethic. And so with that, I want you all just to think about, in relationship to conservation, that conservation ethic is the piece that really brings it together for us. So, my battery got recharged yesterday. My voice doesn't sound like it, but my battery's good. So as I wrap up, I also have a thank you. You know, the support of each of you is felt. And when you engage with me and you let me know, a little challenge here, a little challenge there, that helps me. Don't feel like you can only come to me and say thank you. Please come to me and say, have you thought about this too? And I think that goes for the entire team. Specifically, I want to thank my family. They've put up with quite a bit and had the luxury of actually having my parents and my wife and my daughter here with me. 19-year-old daughter bought her own ticket, showed up out of the blue because she wanted to be with mom and dad. So to them, I say thank you. Folks, this year is going to be a big year. I'm hoping that you're ready to reach new heights with us, to engage with us, to give us that input we need to really advocate on your part. So, with that, thank you for being here, and let's have a great 2015 annual meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, John. And I think you've probably all been in those boots before, but I got to tell you, 35 years in conservation, had the opportunity to look before you all and speak occasionally, but I had this situation here about 3 weeks ago, had a chance to present in front of our group. Guess who's in the audience? My 87-year-old mother. I was a nervous wreck. John, I don't know if it had anything to do with the ball game last night, but it may have something to do with Mr. and Mrs. Jim Larson sitting over the corner. I know what it does to your voice. Thank you for being with us. This time, I'd like to ask Major General Michael Ware, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Commander for the Mississippi Valley Division, to please come to the stage for your keynote address. Major General Michael Ware assumed command of the Mississippi Valley Division, Vicksburg, Mississippi, in August of 2014. He also serves as the President designee on the Mississippi River Commission. As MVD Commander, Ware is responsible for a $2 billion civil works program. In addition, he plays a vital role in managing the Corps' water resources program in the Mississippi River Valley. The Mississippi Valley Division is responsible for water resources, engineering solutions in the 370,000 square mile area extending from Canada to the Gulf of Mexico and encompassing portions of 12 states. Since 1879, the 7-member presidentially appointed Mississippi River Commission has developed and matured plans for the general improvement of the Mississippi River from the head of the passes to the headwaters. The Commission brings critical engineering representation to the drainage basin, which impacts 41% of the United States and includes 1.25 million square miles, over 250 tributaries, 31 states, and 2 Canadian provinces. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Mr. Major Michael Ware.
Thanks, Gene. Well, Gene, with that introduction, I think you gave my whole brief, so I appreciate that advertisement. But in reality, the opportunity to stand before you really comes upon an education, and I just wanted to highlight what Gene mentioned up front. We have inherited tremendous resources from the generations before us. I am a product of that. My parents go back literally as a third-generation military officer, myself in the Army. My father married a woman from California who was a teacher and who grew up in the arid West that understood water, and that connection has lived with me ever since. When my father retired, literally we settled in California, and I started to appreciate the value of that. Now, what I really would like to highlight, though, is not just my personal past, but acknowledge the generations of Americans that have made this country what it is. I have a unique opportunity here, I guess, as the warm-up act has gotten it to this level. I've got to deliver the science and a little bit of engineering. But I just want to thank the Lieutenant Governor, literally, for hosting this, of course, and acknowledging our history. When you discuss the Louisiana Purchase, the reality is it took a vision and it took a lot of sacrifice and treasure to make this possible. So what I'd like to highlight, and I think we've got some slides coming up. There we go. You know, the past generations make it happen through a combination of culture, which has been described earlier, with a lot of agriculture and ability to feed that culture, and of course the science and engineering that make it possible in terms of our environment. And what I wanted to highlight with a few slides is what the mission of the Corps of Engineers does within what we call the Mississippi Valley, but then more importantly, after a little bit of an advertisement up front, acknowledge that there are really 4 revolutions taking place in our nation today, well, globally impacted, of course, that we have an opportunity to be clearly a role player in and to really step up as the generation that currently has the torch to make a difference. So I'll touch on that at the end, the opportunities that do exist, and a little bit about the vision I think that we can all share in terms of water resources. But what I'd like to acknowledge that you can dress me up in a uniform like this, but I'm not going to dance, I'm not going to, at least not now, or play any instruments. But the reality is the people that have gotten us here deserve some recognition. So if I could, referencing that uniform, acknowledge the generations of veterans that are amongst us. If I could just ask them to stand for a moment. Any of them that have served in uniform. It is a real honor to have that legacy that they have provided for us. In fact, if you have not gone to the World War II Museum here in New Orleans, you've really got to do that, unlike anything else in the world. In wearing the uniform, I get to see a lot of this nation. having served in multiple locations, children born in different states, North Carolina, Texas, growing up in California, you really do get to meet a lot of veterans that are living in those locations all over the country. And if you're not familiar with how our Army is structured, I've had the pleasure to serve in what's called the 82nd Airborne Division. You can notice on this crest here, it's the All-American Division, and that represents all 50 states. So it was a really honor to see all the states that are represented in this national forum, and just to realize that together it is an incredible power of diversity, as well as the ability to create solutions to some of our problems. So what I'd like to highlight here is that education that has been secured and developed within our nation makes us have a tremendous future. So what I'll do is I'll talk about the Corps, as I mentioned. I'll talk about some specific projects. And I hope that each of these types of missions I'll highlight within the Corps of Engineers touches you in some way. We realize where you connect to it. But if I could just go to the next slide, I'll get you oriented. This Mississippi Valley Division, which I am the commander of, stretches all the way from Canada down to the Gulf Coast. It involves 6 districts. And more importantly, that is a narrow watershed, but there is quite a bit of contribution that goes into that watershed. And in fact, to the left and right of the middle of the division, you'll see the Northwestern Division and the North Atlantic Division and the Lakes and Rivers Division. If you'll notice on the next slide, these are the individuals that are connected to by those other divisions. So the way America connects to those particular districts is represented in colonels that command these districts. They make it happen, but they are surrounded by, in total, over 4,000 civilians that are experts in everything from archaeology all the way down to zoology, you name it. There are engineers in the middle, but they are certainly not the only part of the Corps of Engineers. We've got hydraulics experts, we've got biologists, we've got landscape architects, project managers, park rangers, of course, which are often provide the interface with the public in recreation, which I'll touch on, and of course, real estate and contracting experts as well. On the next slide, this is really where I wanted to describe that watershed in a little bit better detail. We are truly gifted in this country, and in fact, there's a great article, but it labels us as the inevitable empire. And if you consider the resources that exist from that Louisiana Purchase that the governor mentioned, and how we secure it within a governance that is unmatched anywhere in the world, and you realize that we have access to the entire globe through Louisiana, to the Port of New Orleans, our coasts on the west and the east, you'll realize that this is just unmatched. The amount of produce, the agriculture, the ability to move trade in and out, now it comes at a price, of course, in the investment we make, but again, it is unmatched. 41% of the United States is drained down through the Mississippi River. What that represents is a lifeline of commerce, whether it be through navigation or water supply, which I'll touch on. But the history really does go back to those that had the vision to get that Louisiana Purchase. We celebrated the 200-year anniversary of the Battle of New Orleans with General Jackson, but they had the vision to get what we are enjoying today. With that watershed that you're looking at there, how we interact and communicate to our elected officials is critical. So I'd like to on the next slide, highlight my second role, which is the president of the Mississippi River Commission. Now, the reason this is really important is because it is certainly not just military. You'll recognize perhaps those that are in uniform with the flags behind them. At least, in the far left is my brother John Kem. He commands that Northwest Division. His picture's in the bottom right corner there. And then, of course, above him, Brigadier General Rick Kaiser up in the Lakes and Rivers Division. The NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Agency, is led by Admiral Gulag. The key here is that we've got that military and federal presence, but what's most important is on the left side of those pictures, you've got farmers, you've got engineers, you've got professors. They understand how the engineering and science interact with our land and what we do at the federal level, which is by no means alone. It's truly a partnership that takes place. But those 7 members really are the voice of the concerns within Congress, that we literally twice a year have what we call a low water and a high water trip up and down the Mississippi and some of its other tributaries. What this represents is a public voice. The reason there's a low water trip is because there are certainly concerns with navigation. When the water is low, you've got to make sure you can still move commerce and commodities. In high water, of course, we've got a flood concern, and that's a whole different perspective. But the fact is, these two concerns, whether it be flood risk mitigation or whether it be navigation, are inextricably linked, and that's what this commission helps communicate to Congress. So what I'll quickly do is touch on the next slide some of the missions that are addressed along our watershed. You know, I mentioned navigation, I mentioned flood risk mitigation or reduction. Those two are principal. But as you know from the impacts of hurricanes on the coast, that is certainly a factor as well. Environmental stewardship is a key component, and then I'll touch on some of the others to include regulatory, and I think what is a pretty unique opportunity in terms of even our recreation. On the next slide, I'll just touch on some of the highlights of navigation. Again, this is one of our traditional missions. It's written in the law that the Corps of Engineers will ensure there are navigable waterways, which obviously is important to the health of our nation and its economy. The way we do that is through some significant engineering that took place between the 30s all the way up into the 80s, major construction with locks and dams and other things that help move cargo and barge traffic, of course, up and down the river. I mean, literally, the cost savings by moving on the barge or on the water can be measured in that $2.7 billion of domestic transportation savings. In reality, it's an intermodal system. We certainly don't operate independently of rail or trucking. Those have to contribute as well. But moving on the water is by far the best for the economy in terms of price. And that is basically within a 9-foot channel, 300 foot wide, that is maintained above Baton Rouge, all the way up into the navigable water near St. Paul, Minnesota. This does not come cheap. The ability to maintain that, of course, requires dredging and other requirements that ensure that channel stays where it's most useful for us. So what I'd like to do is highlight on the next slide the mission of flood risk reduction. The vision that occurred after the 1927 flood is codified in what we call the Mississippi Rivers and Tributaries Act. Now what this does is it ensures we certainly don't want that flood to happen again the way it did. And in fact, if you'll recall, in 2011, we were able to pass more water down the Mississippi River than ever before. The amount of water that safely passed through levees and floodways that were activated was unprecedented. But that takes maintenance of the levees, of the flood wall or floodways that need to be repaired. There are certainly tributary basins that need to be maintained, and we have channel improvement and stabilization. I won't get into the details of each of those types of structures, but realize that this system goes all the way up into the headwaters of Lake Itasca in Minnesota, where the water starts to come at the headwaters of the Mississippi and all its tributaries. There are some other things that are part of this system, like reservoirs that absorb the high runoff, and I'll talk about those when I mention some recreation that comes up. Now, along those two major lines of our mission, we are certainly charged with environmental stewardship, which is on the next slide. Our history has not necessarily been focused on this. That's where NEPA came from and the Clean Water Act, but we are certainly on board with ensuring that we comply with that process. In the big picture, it's absolutely essential. We realize in other places of the country, some of the prices that are paid with very rapid development that is really unsustainable unless you look at the environment. And that is really why this audience is so interesting to me, because you do look at it as a way of sustaining the might of our country agriculturally and the good practices that are learned and shared throughout our nation. And just as a little discussion on, why am I here? This happened about 4 years ago that a gentleman who's in the audience, actually, Kevin Norton, handed me a book. And again, I had just started working up in Vicksburg along the river as one of those colonels up there in terms of the Vicksburg District Commander. But the title of the book was The Worst Hard Time by Tim Egan. And I realized, although I didn't read it right away, in fact, I read it after I left Mississippi and went to California to do a similar type of work for the Corps of Engineers, that what our country has gone through and how we learn from it is absolutely essential. And that book is phenomenal when you consider the challenges of the drought, the Dust Bowl, and what was most remarkable in this book I found is that it is based on the people that stayed and did not necessarily go out to California. And you can see that story in The Grapes of Wrath, for example. But without education and without applying lessons learned, it's obviously catastrophic. And the fact that all of you are keeping the education moving forward, I'm truly indebted to you, because without that, our nation does not move commerce, it does not need levees, it does not need a waterway to move what is produced in our nation. So what I'd like to do is highlight just a couple of key points on the environmental stewardship. It does range from restoration, it includes archaeological collections, interbasin studies, coastal wetlands planning, and of course education. Up and down the river there are multiple places where we've established a museum to ensure the next generations understand what they've inherited and how to improve upon it. Just to highlight one up in Vicksburg, for example, which is a little picture down there at the bottom. Literally, you bring together the motor vessel Mississippi, which is the platform that I referenced when I talked about the public meetings. It is literally parked right there next to a museum that describes the river's history and all the contributions that have gone into trying to improve upon it. Now, certainly, environmental stewardship has a process, and I'll go to the next slide, which is our regulatory program. This is another area where we certainly intersect and see ourselves and partner with the Corps of Engineers and all those that are using our waterways. It derives from the Clean Water Act. Our authority really gets derived from the Environmental Protection Agency in terms of the permitting process. Enforcement is ultimately up to the EPA as we provide permits, and they have an opportunity to veto if necessary, but that is part of our process. And it's a balance, and it's certainly on the discussion of many topics, in fact, in the halls of Congress this week. It is a constantly challenging topic that's got to be understood by many parties, and in fact, our Assistant Secretary of Civil Works, Ms. Darcy, is testifying the next couple of days with the administrator of the EPA to make sure we understand some of the changes that are being proposed. Now, what I'd like to do is highlight a couple more missions, at least, on the next slide. You're all familiar, of course, in the news when we've got a disaster. Certainly, it's not just Hurricane Katrina or it's not just Hurricane Sandy, but these things happen all around the country. And the beauty of it is you've got a tremendous force of talent, whether it come from the National Guard, locally, all the way up to the federal level, through what is called the Stafford Act, which basically enables us to elevate the level of assistance needed, but it's only based upon request. It is certainly not a strong hand of the federal government trying to come in and take away the authority of local elected officials. It's a partnership, and we get to exercise it in just about every disaster, and I must say that we've improved it dramatically. The Katrina lessons learned in this very ground that you're enjoying today have helped the nation respond in a more effective and efficient manner. If I could go to the next slide in terms of some of our other projects that you may not consider relating to flood risk mitigation or the waterways, but when we have dams that catch water before it floods the main stem river, we also have hydropower that becomes part of that. There are 4 locations within the Mississippi Valley Division, for example. If you've not been up to Hot Springs, Arkansas, you realize that there are 3 hydroelectric dams up there on some phenomenal lakes, of course, which include recreation. on that next slide, that topic of recreation, I just want to spend a moment here. I think we all can attest to how much we enjoy our nation. And when we are in uniform or as civilians serving overseas, we realize this can represent some of the best memories and best legacy discussions, amongst families on what we get to enjoy in this nation. And what I would highlight is that these are things that the American public expects and enjoys and we value. In other nations that do not get to the level that we have achieved in this country, these are not even afterthoughts. They just don't get there. But I'd like to highlight that the recreational opportunities, whether it's on federal lands or state lands, really is an active part in what's considered our Wounded Warrior program. So the fact that we can host deer hunts and other things that connect our veterans back into America, back into society, a lot of this is occurring on our natural resources, literally in recreation. It's an incredible opportunity that we all enjoy. I'd encourage you to, if you haven't done anything in terms of those parks and recreation, to certainly enjoy those. We have park ranger staff that are the stewards, not only environmentally, but certainly in terms of education as well. Just a great outreach program to include safety and other things. On the next slide, I just want to highlight that although it is a large base of talent within the Corps of Engineers, how do you tap into this federal resource that we've all paid for within our own taxes and other things? It really is a body of knowledge that is available to assist at a technical level and to leverage the laboratories and the lessons learned throughout our nation. The federal government serves a role in areas that other agencies will not pick up until they in fact are picked up later, but there's some great technical knowledge that exists in a few of our labs. For example, the Engineer Research and Development Center, which is what we call ERDIC, or the Waterways Experiment Station, located up in Vicksburg. These areas really do help us. Now, beyond the science, which is something that we enjoy in this nation, I just want to highlight, zooming out a little bit on the next slide, we are across the world. I talked about how we engage within uniform or civilians, but you may not realize that the overseas contingencies that we engage in are well beyond just Afghanistan or Iraq, although those certainly keep us busy. The reality is we're engaging in all over the nation, all over multiple nations throughout the globe. What I would just propose here is that we learn quite a bit from other nations in terms of what they can and cannot accomplish. The people that go into these locations with other agencies learn quite a bit and value what we have in our nation, and they come back with what I would call an expeditionary mindset to improve not only how we're doing business here, but to make sure we all understand the investment and the value that we have that has to be continued. Now, overseas, we're doing things like, I'll just use Afghanistan as an example, where we're building schools, roads. It's literally a $12 billion construction program in Afghanistan alone. What that is doing is, of course, trying to get another nation to connect to its natural resources. If you study the geography of Afghanistan, they are tremendously resource wealthy with the mountains, the water, the snow. Of course, you've heard of maybe the natural resources or the elements inside the mountains, minerals. But the reality is they've got a tremendous opportunity. So with some education, some stability, and some agricultural investment, they can certainly recover, or at least get to another level they've never seen. So with those missions, I just want to spend a little bit of time on what I've called the 4 revolutions. And on the next slide, I think you're all familiar with what is really unprecedented globally with our ability in this nation to produce bushels per acre in terms of wheat, rice, soybeans, and cotton. The ability to leverage our technology. There's the name Borlaug is mentioned up there. For those that have not studied that, I think it's really an amazing thing to consider the amount of research and development and the ability to have high yield back in the 70s. And I think we're really experiencing a second revolution, or a second green revolution, when you consider the amount of technology that is being leveraged. And as you could tell, I think my connection to farming probably only goes back to my great-grandfather who was farming in Sacramento through my mom's side of the family. But I've been fascinated with this strength of our nation. So as I've been serving within the Corps of Engineers, I've had the opportunity to get out on a combine and harvest corn, or at least I sat behind the driver that was making it happen. But what amazed me, of course, is the satellite imagery that was being used, the sensors, the fact that controlled the speed of harvesting the corn based on humidity, and the fact that all that data is being processed. And whether it be laser land leveling for rice, it's an absolute incredible accomplishment that our nation has been able to leverage. It is really unprecedented. And I think the ability to connect our productivity and feed the world, which is really an opportunity because of our secure government, the inevitable multiplier that I described earlier in terms of our protection of that watershed, it gets to really the next point I'm going to make, and that is what I'll call the second revolution on the next slide. But given this abundance of agriculture and the ability to recognize that we've got incredibly inexpensive fuel, which has not always been the case, but as you realize with fracking and other things that's being done through technology, we have an incredible combination of not only agriculture productivity, but also inexpensive fuel. That will change what we do in this world. I have spent most of my career, as others generations have, defending resources around the globe to ensure our standard of living remains what it is. But the ability to not necessarily defend an oil field in the Middle East is certainly a reality these days. We have options as a nation, and it really is an amazing thing that we have done within our nation. We are outproducing Saudi Arabia in the amount of oil we have. Now, we're doing it smartly, as best as possible. Environmentally sensitive is partly part of that as well. But it's an amazing opportunity to leverage. So with inexpensive energy, I'll just go on to the third revolution, which we'll call a return to manufacturing in America. Along the rivers, we see this quite a bit in terms of steel mills that are starting. Just one example, there's a German steel mill that is going up along the Red River to produce steel and ship it back to Europe. I mean, it is more effective to produce in a stable environment with low energy costs and move that product back to the nation that may manufacture or may use it to manufacture. But that's the amount of vision that others have within our nation and the amount of opportunity they see to be able to do that. The last revolution I'll just highlight is certainly we've heard of climate change. I think we're all aware of the impact it has within our farming and our nation's environment and the climatic changes that are taking place. It increases the amount of runoff that we have to deal with. It is changing how we operate some of those structures along rivers, whether they be the floodgates, for example, or the structures that control flow, or the strength of the levees that are needed. But we're also experiencing prolonged droughts. And what I would just highlight here is that this is the challenge of our generation as we stand here or at this point in time and take on an opportunity to leverage all that science that we do have and to look ahead into the future and figure out where the investments are needed, not just to protect our coasts, but in fact to understand how the changes occur within in our inland area to more effectively grow and also move the produce that we have. So in getting close here, the next slide, the bottom line, I think, is that we have opportunities to leverage. We invest an abundant amount of our resources in terms of that $5 to $6 billion a year within, for example, what the Corps of Engineers does within partnership with others. We generate literally $15 billion in revenues back into the Treasury. That's through fees and usage of other things that we have, like recreation is just a small example. And of course, the economic benefits, the national economic development benefits that occur measure up to $50 billion on the return of a dollar. So I mean, with the investment of $5 to $6 billion, we are yielding that much in terms of economic benefits throughout our nation. So the nation's water infrastructure really does make this happen. And the ability to use it wisely is what we rely upon each other to educate ourselves with. So let me just highlight a couple of examples that I've seen that to me represent a combination of many things. If I could just zoom in a little bit on Arkansas. There's a couple of projects in Biomeda, Arkansas, and Grand Prairie, where with the concern of the aquifer and the fact that it is being depleted, especially when we have drought, we're diverting excess water out of rivers, whether it be the White River or the Arkansas River, to replenish those aquifers, to use water smartly. It does take quite an investment. You can see it's about $1 billion, and it's cost shared. It's not all federal, certainly. But again, it not only preserves the aquifer, but it restores the fishery habitats. And also, of course, there's historic native prairies and the creation of waterfowl habitat. So it's a tremendous investment that others have had the vision to pursue. Now, this is a lot of years in the making. It takes a steadiness to stick to the vision. The level of federal funding will come and go, and the motive, of course, is still there at the grassroots level to get it done. But that partnership is critical. So only through dialogue and education can we recognize the value of that type of investment and what it means to the rice farmers that are out there, for example, and the stewardship that they exercise, whether it comes to tailwater runoff. I mean, they're environmentally focused as well, and that education needs to be shared with our elected officials. So in closing, on the last slide here, I just wanted to highlight, I think, what we all can probably sign up for in terms of our 200-year vision. Now, this vision is something that the Mississippi River Commission has been trying to codify based on all those public engagements. But the reality is, as a nation, and based on those generations that defend it, and those that educate it, and those that, in fact, grow the next generation of people that will follow us, we expect our children and those that follow clearly to have secure lives in this inevitable empire within our nation, to enjoy the clean air and the water, and of course to move freely across our nation through good commerce, and of course to choose from the abundance of resources that we do have. It takes flood risk mitigation. It takes environmental stewardship. It takes a lot of engineering in terms of the structures that we have to build, and of course an appreciation of those generations before us that have invested, and we must continue that. So in closing, I just want to say thank you for this opportunity. It's been a true honor to share some of this science, and I think I've got a few moments for questions if necessary or as needed, but I certainly welcome it. I will be in the booth later for discussions as well.
And thank you, Major General Ware. And I think in lieu of time, the Major General's been very gracious to say he'll stick around. We'll have a speaker table in the Expo Center. If we could, we'll just maintain the questions and see if you can't reach the Major General there in the Expo Hall. Appreciate
Thank you.
that.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. And thank you, Major General Ware. You know, when he shared with us some of the history and the vision, and it's truly the opportunity through the relationship and education, as he mentioned so many times, that we strengthen and broaden the opportunity to coordinate and build that capacity to truly work at, maintain, and utilize the resources been given upon us. So thank you again there, Major General Ware. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an event tonight. It's called the NACD Auction. Johnny Regula, are you out there in the audience somewhere? Johnny, how about you? Johnny, you know, he's here on a holiday.
Is that what this is?
Groundhog's Day. Happy Groundhog's Day, Johnny. Now, Johnny, what that means is it's all about shadows. And you shared with me that you'd allowed the ringman tonight, in lieu of the holiday recognition, everybody has a shadow. If you move or the shadow moves, we get a vote.
We get a vote.
That's a bid.
That's a bid.
Johnny, take it away.
That's right. Thank you.
Before we talk about this tonight, I want to express my gratitude, and I think all of us need to thank Gene. This is probably one of the last times that we're going to have the privilege to hear this guy behind the microphone. And some of the times that I've had a chance to be involved with this in the last few years, Gene's been one of the mentors to me. And with that, I want to thank you. Thank you. You know, all of us in the room are leaders in one respect of another, and we understand time, and we understand the time that it takes to be a leader in your community. And when you take the steps up the ladder and become the national leader like Gene has, it really does take time. So with that, thank you very much. All right. Tonight, yes, we are going to have a little auction tonight. One of the things that I was sitting back here listening to Mr. Larson visit with you this morning, and then the gentleman that we just had up here. You know, we sit at home in the evenings and in the mornings or whenever we choose to watch the news, and we hear things that are happening that we don't always necessarily agree with because of the lack of common sense. And it occurred to me this morning that this group is the last bastion of common sense that we have in the United States. Would you agree with that? Well, I'm here to tell you that we all have gifts, ladies and gentlemen, that we have been blessed with over the years in our lifetimes. And one of the things about being the last bastion of common sense is it costs money. And my friend from Georgia, Mr. Redding, taught me a few years ago when I got involved in this that don't be ashamed to ask for money. So that's my gift. We're going to invite you back here tonight at 6 o'clock. These doors are going to open up. We're going to feed you at 6 o'clock. We're going to have a thing that's called a drawdown, that if you choose not to be involved in the auction, we have a chance for you to invest your $20 as many times as you would like, with the chance of maybe winning some of it back. Two of you are going to win $500 back. Now, in the meantime, we're going to do an auction that is very important to this group, and the fact that we're getting ready for the big election years coming up, and folks, it takes money. So for us to be the common sense vote of the United States, I encourage you to come tonight, participate. There's a book out that's got some of the things. The rest of them are on display right here in the trade show entrance. But we encourage you to come back tonight, 6 o'clock. We're going to entertain you. We're going to have a lot of fun. We might even do a little drinking, Gene.
Thank you, Johnny.
Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Johnny. Thank you. And as Johnny said, you know, it's a little bit about the revenue, and I think part of that is in recognition to the sponsorship that helps put this annual meeting together for you all. And with that, I'd like to recognize these folks: Agri-Drain Corporation, Apache, Bayer Crop Science, Bob Warner, Case IH, John Deere, Maryland Association of Conservation Districts, Monsanto, National Farmers Union, Plum Creek, Scott's Miracle-Gro, Syngenta, U.S. Forest Service, USDA NRCS, and Verdician. If you haven't already gone through the expo hall, please take the opportunity to do that. And especially because of the U.S. Forest Service contribution to help make that exhibit hall available and possible, just stop by and say thank you for those folks and their participation along with that. We're also excited about the Share Fair. The District Share Fair will take place just kind of across the hall there. Excellent opportunity to network and hear ideas from fellow conservation districts. And that will be in Salon C, and that transpires from 10:45 to 11:45. We have a group of first-timers here this year, and as part of that, they have an opportunity to reach out and visit with you all and maybe get your signature. Well, there'll be a drawing for the winner for that first-timer. That drawing will take place tomorrow at the intermission of the morning general session. You must be present to win. Along with that, you all have the opportunity in the exhibit hall to have your card stamped by all the exhibitors. That's twofold, to make sure you get a chance to be there, visit with them. We also have a drawing for you folks. That will take place at the end of tomorrow morning's general session. You must be present to win. Is that encouragement? Thank you. And we also have a display back here and for you by registration. We encourage you all, if you want to take a photo, that's an excellent backdrop to make that happen. Along with that, we have a immediate press release on our website that you all can utilize. It's important to take the message, take it back that you took the opportunity to come out here and utilize your time to get better educated, help understand conservation effort, but share that with the media back home. Folks, people need to know you're engaged. There's more people watching you than you realize. Also remember your badge. A few of our events have badge events. That's part of the security of the hotel that we cooperate with that, but you're going to need your badge events to enter some events, including the leadership luncheon today, the auction tonight, and the banquet on tomorrow night. So please remember to bring your badge. We don't want to hold anybody out from those sessions. Ladies and gentlemen, we can't thank you enough for your dedication, your cooperation, but most important, your enthusiasm. And you know, as shared with me a long time ago, the key to really making things happen is attitude. I hope that we, as your national organization, have the opportunity to bring you to a location like this. Start you off with an inspiration that makes you feel good, and I think you'll be excited to know that we hope we can provide the background and the education, the opportunity to feel good about everything you learn about while you're here. And on Tuesday night, when you attend the banquet, that we can give you an uplift and a spirit and inspiration that will send you home high, that you truly felt that this is a worthwhile event. Thank you so much for being here. Enjoy the day. Welcome to New Orleans and Louisiana. This adjourns this session. Thank you.
A couple guys in first class on a flight from New York to Los Angeles, kind of making small talk, killing time, flirting with the flight attendants. 30,000 feet above could be Oklahoma. Just a bunch of square cornfields and wheat farms, man.